A tall, bearded suicide bomber walked into a government building in Kabul yesterday. He set off an alarm at the doorframe metal detector. This bomber explained this alarm as being a steel rod implanted in his body. The man in reality was wearing a suicide vest packed with explosives. This bomber triggered off this vest sometime later, and one of his targets was Khalil Haqqani, an influential member of the Haqqani network. Now, suicide bombings are not new to the Haqqanis. For decades, they've used these suicide bombers to attack targets inside Afghanistan. In 2008, a Haqqani network suicide bomber killed 58 people at the Indian embassy in Kabul. Also killed in the explosion were India's defense attaché, Brigadier Ravi Mehta, an IFS officer V.V. Rao, and two ITBP police officers, Ajay Pathania and Roop Singh. But in 2024, the Haqqanis have been in the government headed by the Taliban for 3 years now. Khalil Haqqani's nephew, Sirajuddin Haqqani, in fact, leads the network and is the interior minister in Afghanistan. But who is gunning for the Haqqanis, really? Because he is the first major figure to be assassinated in the 3 years since the Taliban took power in Kabul. Is there a civil war brewing inside Afghanistan right now? Joining me to discuss this are Imtiaz Gul, author and senior journalist live from Islamabad, Ashok Behuria from the Manohar Parrikar IDSA, he's an AFPAC specialist, and in the studio, I have with me my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Aditya, I have to start by asking you this. The Haqqanis, the pioneers of suicide bombing, are under attack themselves. Is the shoe on the other foot now in Afghanistan?
Well, if you live by the gun, you die by the gun.
Right.
And
or in this case, the suicide bomber.
In this case, the suicide bombing. I mean, the Haqqanis have been responsible for the same kind of suicide bombing for years and years, all across Afghanistan.
Right.
I mean, one thing that has changed significantly ever since the Taliban really took over is the reduction in the number of suicide bombing that has happened in Afghanistan, especially in Kabul.
Yes.
I mean, I remember a lot of cases where suicide bombings and attacks have happened targeting the Indian missions as well, not just the Indian embassy in Kabul, but our missions in Mazar-e-Sharif, in Kandahar, in Herat, and other places. And this time around, it's Khalil Haqqani, the uncle of Sirajuddin Haqqani. And imagine, Sirajuddin Haqqani is not only till very recently the most wanted man on earth, but also someone who is the interior minister right now. So he is the man in charge. He is the man in command for the security. And he perhaps will have to ask questions to himself and his ministry as to what really triggered this. But there are rebel factions. There is division within the Taliban as well. And there are other groups like the Al-Qaeda, and in this particular case, a faction of the ISIS, which has claimed responsibility. Now, in Paktia province, the funeral has been taking place for the last few hours. And we've seen massive levels of security. It's almost similar to Syria, where there are various rebel groups, and the new group, the HTS, is being dubbed as the Kandahar version of the Taliban. And is that so? Well, one has to dwell further. But these are tactics that have been used by the Haqqani family for a very long time. And it's only plausible, and it's only going to happen more frequently now. And perhaps there are other factors as well, or other powers which are responsible for attacking the Haqqanis.
Other factors, other powers responsible for attacking the Haqqanis. And an interesting point there, Aditya, the fact that the onus of this blast now rests with the interior minister, who is Sirajuddin Haqqani, possibly one of the most powerful members in the Afghan government headed by the Taliban. But Imtiaz Gul, explain to us if you believe there is actually a faction fight going on in the Taliban right now. There are various factions of the Taliban. We've heard of the Quetta Shura, the Kandahari Shura, and now, of course, the very powerful Haqqani network. As Aditya was mentioning, is this like Afghanistan heading towards a Syria kind of situation with all these rival groups now starting to fight among themselves?
Well, I think your introduction basically betrays a certain level of confusion. Kandahari Shura or Quetta Shura or all these things. I would say, based on our experience, there is no factional fighting going on within Afghanistan. There are
Right.
differences, of course.
Right.
Haqqanis are from the east.
Yes.
They occupy a greater area. They maintain a very big force, fighting force. They occupy important ministries, whereas Kandahar, it's a very minuscule, small group.
Yes.
But the authority over Afghanistan rests with that small group, with the Amirul Mominin,
Yes.
as you call it, Hibatullah Akhundzada,
Right.
calling the shots. So there is no factional fighting. However, there are still proxies out there, proxies
Right.
for outside forces, and that proxy is the ISKP,
Right.
the Islamic State of Khorasan province. They have claimed responsibility for this attack, and coincidentally, or really not coincidentally, Amaq is the website, the portal that basically releases information on what the IS or ISKP or Daesh
Yes.
is doing across the world. And on this website, they have released the picture
Right.
of the suicide bomber.
Yes.
So that basically dispels, denies all this speculation about the factional fighting within the Taliban. They remain, I think, a very much united group.
Right.
They realize that only by sticking together
Yes.
will they be able to lord over this country.
Right. They remain a united group. But, quick follow-on question to you, Imtiaz Gul. You mentioned there were proxy actors. ISIS-KP, you believe, is a proxy for some external forces? Or is it a completely indigenous movement?
Well, if not proxy for somebody else, then what would be the objective of these people? There's a very small, a couple of thousand at most, people fighting to take control of Afghanistan.
Right.
Not really fighting for taking control, but they have been out there. They in the 2018, 19,
Yes.
2021, they basically carried out a number of attacks. They topped actually the attacks that were carried out by the Taliban themselves.
Yes.
So they are definitely proxies acting on behalf of somebody to just create instability, a sense of destabilization,
Right.
and then also to trigger speculation on the authority of the Taliban as they look today.
Right. Multiple factors at play over here, but Ashok Behuria, you are our resident AFPAC specialist at the MP IDSA. Break down for us what is going on right now. Do you believe there is some kind of faction fighting within the Taliban, or as Imtiaz Gul just said, that it is a pure case of the Taliban being terrorized by the ISIS-KP, the pattern that has been on for the last couple of years and may have fallen silent in the last few months? But give us your take on this very sensational killing of one of the Haqqani network's very influential figures.
See, I will not be too complacent like Mr. Imtiaz Gul, that there is absolutely no differences between factions within the Taliban. We know that there is a Hibatullah Akhundzada faction, there is a
Yes.
more moderate Baradar faction, then you have the Haqqanis. And it seems that Hibatullah Akhundzada and Baradar factions, they are hanging together. And Hibatullah Akhundzada is pushing for Islamic Sharia-based system, and they are insular. They do not want to interact with the rest of the world. And quite counterintuitive report has been going on that Haqqanis, who were anti-US and US had designated many of their cadres as
Yes.
terrorists, they have been talking about having an inclusive system in Kabul. So there are differences. In fact, in March 2023, if I remember correctly, or October 2023, something like that, in 2023, but there was a report where it was stated that Haqqani, Sirajuddin Haqqani,
Yes.
had actually publicly criticized Hibatullah Akhundzada's policies, where he said that we are monopolizing power, we are not doing things right, we should be doing things differently, we should remember that we are responsible to people at the end of the day, and if it doesn't happen, there will be problem. So immediately after that, Jabiullah Mujahid came out and said that Islamic courtesy demands that we should not be talking about like this, talking about our leader like this. We should be restrained. So
Right.
to say that there are no differences would be not recognizing the reality on the ground. Having said that, let me tell you that ISKP, whenever they have attacked, because in 2023 they attacked the Balkh governor, then they attacked Badakhshan deputy governor, they killed them, and they immediately claimed it.
Yes.
Right. But in this case, it baffles me why they haven't claimed it yet. So that gives out some suspicion that maybe there is some other forces at work.
Right.
And let me tell you that this is not the first lapse under
Right.
Sirajuddin Haqqani's watch. Ali was killed, in Sirpur, which is very close to the capital. So in that sense, there have been lapses, and the reports that come out say that the guy who had a bandaged hand, and within the bandage they had concealed this thing, and this guy was pretending to be a refugee and
Yes.
seeking government help, Taliban help.
Right.
So in that sense, I would say whatever that the issue is, we must recognize that there could be some infighting going on as well. But what is more interesting is the case that what Mr. Gul said, the proxies are doing it.
Yes.
I would say that there is a competitive radicalism at work.
Right.
Like Taliban were hanging on to an emirate in Afghanistan,
Yes.
and now ISIS are saying that we have to take it to a global level.
Right,
So that is the
right.
ideological difference which is driving them.
Right.
And simply by saying that, because last year something happened where, a group from, not last year, this year, a group from Balochistan, they went into Afghanistan and killed some people in some directorate. And immediately the Taliban had stated that it is the handiwork of Pakistan. So
Right.
the point I'm making is that the reality there is much more complex than
Yes.
perhaps we would fathom. I will stop by pointing out another interesting reality which has come to my notice. That is, the curious relationship that Haqqanis have
Yes.
with both TTP and ISKP
Right.
and Al Qaeda. So it is an interesting case to conduct your research on. So they have not only relationship with Al Qaeda,
Yes.
they also have some kind of link with ISKP and TTP.
Right.
And in spite of it, given the kind of relationship that Haqqanis have with Pakistan, it is interesting to see that neither the Haqqanis nor Akhundzadeh have been able to contain TTP.
Right.
So that shows that the situation out there is much more radicalized than we perhaps imagine.
Right. Situation is much more radicalized than we imagine. But Aditya, in the last few months, the government of India, especially the MEA, has been making a outreach to the Taliban. We've had key MEA officials going there and meeting them. The Haqqanis are no friends of India, and I think they've made that very clear in the past. How would India perceive this attack on the Haqqani network, given the fact that this is one part of the Taliban government that we are very uncomfortable with, given the past history of attacks against Indian mission in Afghanistan?
Sandeep, on a lighter note, I would have imagined that Pakistanis would have much more understanding of the way the Haqqanis really operate. Haqqanis being the state guests of Pakistan for a very long time
Right.
before they really took over. But clearly, no. I mean, in the recent years, the Pakistanis and the Haqqanis
Yes.
especially have grown far, far away from
Right.
each other. So your question is very interesting, how India, instead
Yes.
of Pakistan, has been inching closer over the last few months and especially last couple of years. In fact, JP Singh, who is the Joint Secretary PI,
Yes.
and he handles the ministry and of course the office of Minister Jaishankar, is the man who is looking at the relationship with Taliban.
Right.
And there have been various engagements that have been happening. In fact, last month alone, JP Singh was there in Kabul meeting
Yes.
representatives of the Taliban emirate. So this clearly indicates that strategic rebalancing is happening.
Right.
India has grown much more closer to Taliban, and this is not just because New Delhi is recalibrating things.
Yes.
It's also the Taliban which realizes the economic value
Right.
a relationship with New Delhi will be, instead of having being the B team, so-called
Right.
B team of Pakistan, which Pakistan had dreamt of or
Yes.
imagined.
Right.
So as of now, I believe that this relationship will continue at this same pace. We will not have New Delhi officially recognizing Taliban.
That was
or the
going to be my
Taliban
next
government.
question, if they're
Yeah,
going to
that's clearly
officially
not going to happen
Right.
because of various reasons, obvious reasons. But this relationship of India giving humanitarian aid,
Yes.
aiding the people of Afghanistan, which traditionally India has done for decades together.
Yes.
That will continue. But security remains a very important challenge.
Security
and
of Indian diplomats and Indian
not just
personnel.
Indian diplomats, I mean security as a whole in Afghanistan,
Right.
because you would remember, Sandeep, that in 2021 when Taliban took over,
Yes.
one of the subjects of interest
Yes.
was that how the security would be managed, because just when the exit of the US troops was happening, there was a massive bomb blast that took place outside the Hamid Karzai airport.
Yes.
And while we were trying to rescue our diplomats and the last remaining Indian citizens and minority Hindus and Sikhs, there was a massive security concern, and there have been chatter within the Indian National Security, Secretariat as well,
right.
as to how things will be taken forward. I should tell you that there is an Indian embassy there, which is
Yes.
functional.
Yes.
There are some Indian diplomats and security
But it's a
officers.
skeletal presence.
It's a skeletal, but nonetheless,
Yes.
there are Indian boots on ground. I mean,
Right.
the diplomatic boots.
Yes.
So we'll have to wait and watch and monitor things closely. But I am pretty much confident that India's relationship with the Taliban is
Right.
only growing further
Right.
in months ahead. Even though security remains a challenge, but on security level also, I think
Yeah.
we will have some kind of an understanding or a cooperation with them.
Some kind of understanding, cooperation, short of a full-fledged diplomatic
That's right.
recognition, which I think no country in the world has recognized the Taliban till now. But let me ask Imtiaz Gul this. Imtiaz, this what Aditya mentioned, this India's outreach to Afghanistan, especially the Taliban regime over there. How is it being viewed in Islamabad, given the fact that Pakistan was supposed to have been controlling things in Afghanistan, the so-called strategic depth that we've been hearing about for decades, that didn't happen. How is the Pakistan establishment looking at this rebalancing, as Aditya said, the strategic rebalancing in New Delhi?
I think every neighbor is always conscious of what is happening in the neighborhood. It's true for almost every country. This is what Pakistan is doing. Pakistan's own relations with the Afghan Taliban are not really the best at the moment because of what the TTP has been doing
Yes.
across the border. So that is a big challenge that remains very much potent for Pakistan, and Pakistan is primarily focused on how the Afghan Taliban are handling the TTP and whether they are ready to basically go for some sort of demonstrable action against the TTP. Our special representative was supposed to actually fly into Kabul yesterday, but because of the Khalil Haqqani's incident, I think that visit has been postponed. But I think there is resumption of high-level contacts between the two countries, and obviously they will be conscious of of the Indian outreach to the Afghan Taliban. Obviously, everybody likes to stay in touch and updated on what the neighbor is doing with other countries.
Yes, absolutely. Ashok, India's outreach to the Taliban, as Aditya mentioned, where do you see this headed? I mean, short of a full-fledged diplomatic recognition, where do you see India building bridges with the Taliban? Do you see a possible connect that we had pre-2021 being re-established in some form or the other?
No, I think it is driven by our neighborhood first policy. The catch phrase is non-reciprocity.
Right.
And we have been doing it for years now. We are the ones who spent about $3 billion in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021.
Yes.
So in that sense, we are actually doing what we have been doing since last 2 decades. So I think we have to stop looking at Afghanistan through the Pakistan lens.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
In fact, that will be really foolish of us
Yes.
to look at the Taliban as or Haqqanis as agents of Pakistan.
Right.
I will give you a contradistinction here.
Yes.
The distinction is, you see, I gather reports of Hindu temples being revitalized around Kabul. I have heard about Taliban facilitating transport of water from Kabul River for Ram Mandir here. It could
Right.
not have been possible without Haqqani's express consent.
Right.
So Haqqani has also changed.
Okay.
In fact, Haqqani is the one who is batting for inclusive government.
Right.
Contrary to what we would otherwise think.
Right.
So, secondly, you see, it's a very interesting situation emerging. Pakistan is alleging the TTP is attacking Pakistan from across the border.
Yes.
The Taliban are saying the ISKP is attacking us from across the border.
Right.
So it is a very interesting situation emerging there. And I would say TTP today has a lot of similarity with ISKP. So that means the Pak-Af badland, that
Yes.
borderland,
Yes.
is actually controlled by these elements who enjoy the,
Yes.
what do you say, in a kind of indirect support of the Haqqanis and the Taliban together.
Right.
So there, I don't think there is enough difference between the Taliban and the Haqqani and the Akhundzade group.
Right.
So the point now is, how should India conduct itself forward?
Yes.
I think we should keep doing what we are good at.
Right.
I remember when Taliban were not in power and they were fighting the US international security forces, at that point of time in 2013, 2014, Taliban had come out with a statement that we
Yes.
are very happy with what Indians are doing. Very
Right.
grudgingly they had said it.
Yes.
And today they are inviting India to come and do good things out there.
Right.
So I think going forward,
Yes.
the kind of repair that we have with the Chinese at the moment, and the kind
Yes.
of relationship that we have with the Russians and the Americans,
Right.
we are in a good position to bring in investment to Afghanistan and
Yes.
rebuild Afghanistan. And there, I think India can take a leadership role, and that is the way forward. We
Yeah.
should not only be helping ourselves, but we should also enable an international coalition of forces to rebuild Afghanistan.
Yes.
And this is not to ensure that the Taliban are strengthened,
Right.
but to ensure that the people of Afghanistan get their due. They have been in the war for a long,
Yes.
long period. I only hope that this killing of Khalil Rahman has got nothing to do with the conspiracy theories that we hear about. There are
Yes.
two major conspiracy theories which are in the works.
Yeah.
The one is, the Americans had designated him as a terrorist, so Americans might have done
Yeah.
something on that.
Right.
And the other thing is that Pakistan was for long, requesting the Haqqanis and Akhundzade to rein in the TTP.
Yes.
And now perhaps they have done, or they have, allowed something by omission or commission to happen, which will actually force the Haqqanis to go after the TTP.
Right,
So these are-
absolutely. A very interesting conspiracy theories, smoke and mirrors, and the AFPAC badlands, as you said, Ashok Behuria. But we're completely out of time here. Thank you very much for joining us, Imtiaz Gul, Ashok Behuria, and of course my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. As we are talking about the leopards changing their spots in Syria, the HTS and Golani coming to power over there. Let's not take our eyes off the original leopards, and the debate about leopards changing their spots actually began in Afghanistan a couple of years back when the Taliban took power, and now there seems to be a very interesting state of play there in Afghanistan, a country that we can't afford to ignore because it's right in our backyard. But that's a story we've been tracking in News9 for very long. Continue to watch us as we play out the AFPAC story and the Badlands. Thank you very much.